Hey family, for today's Wealth and Wisdom conversation, I wanted to make sure that I close out Women's History Month as we celebrate and honor women. I invited Paris Jackson back to sit down and have a conversation with me as we talk about the woman who's learning to stand again. So during this month, as we celebrate and honor women and the history of women, I want to take this time to acknowledge the woman who's learning to stand again after loss and say, sis, we see you. Because the reality is we're all at different stages and phases in our life. And I would do this series a disservice if I didn't stop to carve out time and create a conversation for the woman that's recovering after a setback. Whether you are in recovery mode from a career pivot, a divorce, becoming a widow, and even for the woman that's feeling lost as a single woman. And of course, we have access to resources like therapy and life coaching and grief counseling. We want to add an addition to this by giving you hope and by also giving you practical steps to incorporate on your financial wellness journey as you begin to rebuild after experiencing a setback. And from a personal experience, in 2015, I experienced a sudden, abrupt career pivot where I lost my career. Not my job, but I lost my career. And it left me feeling very hopeless, and it left me feeling very helpless. I remember being so embarrassed because I ended up exhausting my savings account trying to stay afloat. And I had a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, and every time I turned around, the plans that I put in place all continued to fall through. So much so that I remember being so embarrassed and distraught that I was at what I feel the height of my career. And here I am, embarrassed with nothing, going to the unemployment office with my shades on and a black hoodie with my hood over my head to fill out paperwork because it was time for me to start drawing from unemployment because I didn't have anything. I also felt helpless and I felt hopeless because I was at a point to where I had to sit down and write letters to those that I owed money to, meaning businesses that I owed money to, asking for them to give me a 30 or a 60-day extension because I no longer had the capacity to pay them. Little did I know, what I thought would take me a month or 2 months to recover, this was a long 6-month journey where I had no job and very little income. I fell subject to my pride because although I did have my family as a support, my pride wouldn't let them help me because I was so used to, as a career woman, having my own, paying my way for whatever it is that I needed and desired out of life, to now feeling so small that I had to lean and depend on people. And I remember my family and even my best friend always telling me, you're going to recover from this. You're going to get back up on your feet. And I am a woman of faith, but I'll be very honest. My faith was depleted and I was exhausted. My faith was very fatigued to the point to where I had no choice but to borrow their faith in seeing that I would recover again, borrowing their faith in seeing that I'm going to bounce back, borrowing their faith in seeing that I'm going to rebuild after loss and rebuild after a setback. And it made me think of the story of Peter. Peter is my favorite person in the Bible. But it made me think of the story of Peter where he was also exhausted and tired from fishing all night and all day and he didn't catch anything. And it got to a point to where he was on the shore washing his nets, which is symbolic for, I don't know what more to give. I've tried and it's just not working. And Jesus saw him and told him, go back out there and cast your net. And of course, in his mind, he came up with, I've been out here all day. I'm trying this, I'm trying that, as I did. I was trying and applying for different jobs. And also after I would apply, I would go back to these establishments to make sure that they were able to put a name with the face of the resume that they received. And just like how Peter would say back to Jesus, well, Lord, if you say so. I guess I go back, and when I would hear different people tell me, you're going to recover, you're going to bounce back from this, all I had was if you say so. And it was important for me in that season to partner with and pair myself with people who saw what I couldn't see, people who saw that I could rebound from this. Because what I did know that was, because I had little hope and because I felt helpless, I knew enough to know that I couldn't connect myself with a person that was complacent in life. I knew enough to know that I couldn't connect myself and pair myself with somebody who also had very little hope. I knew I had to partner with someone who had lots of hope and lots of faith, because this 6 months journey was very dark and very long. Needless to say, fast forward 6 months later, after no job, very little income outside of my unemployment checks, I was able to land a job. Not a career, so I thought, but a job. And as soon as I got that job, Paris, I made sure that my first paycheck all went to these establishments that I wrote letters to asking for extension after extension after extension. I took every dime and paid each of them back. Also, with that, what I learned from that dark period was I believe that indirectly, not knowing it, I likely made my career my idol. I likely made my abilities and my skill sets and my hustle mentality to make sure that I always exceed in whatever it is that I do, and I do it full out. I go 100% in everything. I likely made my skill sets also an idol. And I got to a point where I believe God allowed me to sit still for 6 months because I no longer had those idols. All I literally had was me borrowing the faith of my family, me borrowing the faith of my friends, and me also depending on God. So to the woman that's listening who lost their career, lost something, I want to say that I never thought that I would be able to recover. And I also thought that if I did recover, I will only recover just enough. But fast forward, I can honestly say that, man, when you are at your rock bottom moment, and when you borrow the faith of other people, and when you begin to realize the things that you may have made an idol without even realizing it in the moment, God will provide. You will not only recover just enough, you will recover fully. So much so that I always remember where I was in 2015, even till this day. But I also ask God to not fully remove the residue of what was, so that I can always remain humble and I can always sit back and go, okay, what and where in your life are you indirectly, not even knowing, making something or someone an idol? So to the woman that's recovering, I say continue to recover, continue to keep rebuilding. It is possible to recover from ground zero with zero, just as I have. And I would encourage you that if you can just partner with someone that has hope, if you can partner with family who can pour faith back into you, even when you have no faith, just simply borrow their faith. And just as I did, say, well, if you say so. If you see me recovering, I'll accept that. If you see me rebounding, I'll accept that. And little by little, continue to pray and ask God to reveal where He wants you to be. And I promise you, just as you are witnessing me, as well as Paris, it is very possible for you to fully recover and stand back on your feet again.
Oh, Cheryl. We often look at people from the outside and we say, man, that person has got it together. You can even, look at me and you right now and say, they look nice. They have on nice clothes. Their background is nice, but what it took to get here is a completely different story. And so I am truly thankful for the way that you just allowed God to get His glory in your story. And since we're sharing, let's go. I did not have the experience of a job loss, but I did have the experience of divorce. I had the experience of moving, my kids from place to place because I was serving in the military. And so although money was, consistent, I wasn't wise in my use of it. And so because my mindset was dependent on, well, hey, I'm married and half of the bills are going to be paid and I'm always going to have a roof over my head, never did I expect for it to go the opposite way. And so when my marriage ended, in my mind, my world ended. Because how do I? How do I start over? How do I, continue to move forward and progress? And for me, there was so many steps backwards because there was so much going on at that time. I had things that I was dealing with my family. moving people into the home that, at 20 something years old, I wasn't expecting to have to do. Um, but God had other plans. And so I went so far backwards that there were points where I wanted to take my life, because I could not see what the future was, and I could not personally see a way to come out of it. And so when you said borrowing other people's faith, that's one really, really critical, important thing. But the other thing is to look up, because as you look up and you get ready to pray to God, you'll realize that He's already put the right people in your path. He's already put the right people in your place and not for them to give you a handout, right? But just for them to be that baseline support while you're doing what you're doing, while we're grinding and try to figuring these things out. And so I definitely appreciate your story. I have, trying to hold back the tears because I know exactly what it feels like to be rock bottom. But I'm so hopeful for anybody that's listening, because you and I also both know what it's like to come out of it. And like you said, not just come out, like God is doing his big thing in our lives right now. But I appreciate the comment about the residue, because when you let go of completely let go of the past from the perspective of that was never me, right? Then it's going to be really easy for you to get back into the situation that you just came out of. And so I'm with you. Like, remind me, God, keep me humble. And in this profession that we're in, when we're trying to reach other people, that's a quality that I appreciate that He allowed us to go through, right? Why would we not, or why how could we essentially be able to help somebody else if we don't know what they're going through? And so a lot of times, somebody who's listened, it's not even your fault that you're going through this, right? You're going through it so that you can have the humility, so that you can help somebody else, potentially save somebody else's life and show them, yep, I've been through that. And not only I know you can make it through it, but here's how. I think the first thing is to sit down and breathe. Sit down and understand that life has changed, and don't allow the change to derail your future. And so what I mean by that is I would challenge whoever this person is to repurpose yourself. Look at a new vision, not sight, but vision. Where is it that you see yourself? What has God promised for you? And then we want to backwards into the sight portion. So I want to identify again where I'm going, remind myself that, hey, I still can build that business. I still can be a multimillionaire. I still can leave legacy to my kids. Divorce is not the end all be all, right? It may cause you to pause, reflect, realign yourself with God and start over. But it is such a setup if you understand what's really, really going on. And so, again, I know what the feeling is initially when you get a divorce, but the change, the change that's going to occur in you, the new habits that you're going to build, and the new people that are going to come into your life are so well worth you identifying why you as an individual are here. And if you don't know what that is, then it's time to get back to prayer, into getting that thing that God was wanting from you in the first place. You mentioned, hey, my job was my idol. Sometimes, Cheryl, that spouse was our idol.
Yeah.
And it took the time away from what we were supposed to be doing with God. And so while we may not know the reasons, the divorce is here, right? So we accept it, we move forward, but practically, identify your vision. Where do you still want to go? And then backwards plan into where you are right now. So maybe we need to reestablish our budget, look over it again and say, okay, I was used to this, and these things are here, and this is what I know I have to pay for. And once we identify that, then we can sit down and say, well, what's next? Do I need to do a job interview? Do I need to get a side hustle, something to bring in a little bit more income? Do I maybe need to just reduce my expenses so that I know that I can truly, truly manage it? I think when I'm working with most clients, if I could speak for them, the biggest part is fear of the unknown. And we don't always want to look that budget in the face, because it's it produces anxiety, right? If I don't know, or if I've been so used to a certain type of lifestyle, it was comfortable. I never had to worry about a mortgage, and now I do. Or, or I know that when I do look at this, it's going to force me to maybe even take some steps further back than where I already am. And that's really uncomfortable, right? So, looking at your vision, establishing or reestablishing your budget, and then sitting down with someone that can help you make a plan or build that roadmap for you to get from where you are right now, your new self, and help you kind of build a new normal into where you're trying to go.
So you mentioned the possibility of us making our spouses an idol. That was such a key perspective that you dropped with us. And it's something for us to always sit back to think about within ourselves. What have we made an idol? And sometimes that could be a spouse. So let me ask you this, Paris. You may, I'm not sure, have sat down with women who may not have gone through a divorce, or maybe they have, but you may have sat down with the woman or with someone who unfortunately is grieving the process of losing their spouse, and they're trying to figure out financially, what does that look like for them? Where do they even start while they're trying to figure things out? And also they're grieving at the same time. So from a financial perspective, what level of hope and also financial strategies can you share to the woman that's listening who is likely experiencing the loss of their spouse?
Um, I would tell that woman to grieve. I understand that life will still go on, but there's so much that almost accrues from somebody not processing their grief. And, sometimes we're not fortunate enough to stay at home for a couple of weeks. But I would encourage you to find a way to deal with what you're going through and deal with your emotions first and foremost. Second, kind of similar to what we already talked about, like everybody has to start over. And the pain from the grief is there, but the starting point is the same. So whether I'm divorced, or whether I'm grieving, or whether I lost my child, or whether I lost my job, we all have to get back to the point where we orient ourselves to where we are right now. And so even more so than the last situation, connecting yourself with somebody who has that hope for you, that has the ability to see the light at the end of the tunnel, that can tell you, hey, I believe in what is coming next for you. I believe in what we can do together. Somebody that supports you emotionally, somebody that may be able to help, financially with some things you have going on, and somebody who can produce the plan for you to move to the next level. And so for someone who's grieving, we got to identify things like what was left behind. Maybe you were left with wealth, and maybe you were left with debt. In either situation, if I'm left with wealth, I want to make sure that I place that money somewhere where it can produce a different lifestyle for me. Maybe I can now secure my retirement. Maybe I can, make sure my kids go to college and they don't have to worry about having student loan debt. Maybe I can pay off the house that we're living in so I don't have to worry about the mortgage. But if you're not the person who received wealth when your significant other passed, then maybe it's, hey, let's develop a plan so that I can work to pay my bills, so that I can ensure that, my lifestyle, if it changes, I know what needs to change, and I'm not guessing, and kind of creating a lot of anxiety about things that I'm not 100% sure of.
Perfect. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I want us to talk about someone that's listening that's experiencing some riffraff in their relationship or in their marriage, because sometimes the commonality in it is money, and trying to figure out what are our views on money. And of course, neither of us are marriage counselors, but we can also shed insight in regards to money in relationship and in marriages. So Paris, what are your thoughts on this? I was thinking that oftentimes right before someone is going to get married, or perhaps you're thinking about getting married, they also go through premarital premarital counseling. But I thought it would also be awesome to not just do premarital counseling, but to also sit down with a financial wellness coach, or perhaps someone like you, a comprehensive financial advisor, because ultimately you are taking two cultures that were raised differently. They have different viewpoints, not just on money, but on life. And these two cultures has to merge together to create and redefine a new culture that works for them. What's your thoughts on the possibility of also joining in on premarital counseling sessions by bringing in a financial professional?
I think it's an amazing idea, Cheryl. And the reason being is when I sit in front of couples, there's one question that I ask each of them to answer separately. And I say, hey, tell me a little bit about your childhood. How did you learn about money, and how do you think that shaped the way you make financial decisions today? And more often than not, the answers are different, the responses are different. And one person may have grown up in a two-parent household, and while money wasn't like a conversation that was abundant in their lives, they were still able to see the functionality of having two incomes. And then you have the other person that may have grew up in a single parent home, or they live with their grandparents, or whatever the case is, but it was different, right? And so some people grew up with everything being done for them. Some people had to have jobs at 14, 15, and not realizing that all of those things shaped who we are today. But the common denominator in both scenarios was that they weren't really taught about money. So I can tell you all day long, Cheryl, hey, you need to save, but what does that mean? Where do I save the money? How much am I supposed to be saving? Like, what do I use my savings for? And so those type of things weren't talked about. And so when you leave the home, right, and then you join with somebody else, now you have to figure out what you didn't know, what you kind of learned when you were growing up, and then merging those two ideas together. And that can be very, very contentious. However, I will say that there's no cookie cutter answer. I have couples that work very, very well together that have separate bank accounts. I have couples that work well together that have separate bank accounts and a joint account for the bills. And I have couples who merge everything together. And so the beauty about the question that you asked is, if you do this ahead of time and prior to the marriage, we can know these things. We can know, hey, I know who I am and what I think about. And I know what's important to my soon to be spouse, because if we can build a plan together, whether that is, hey, we know we need to establish a bill account and we both contribute to that account based off of our income. I'm going to put in X amount of dollars, you're going to put in X, and that's how we pay our bills. Or, hey, babe, I would really love and feel secure if we could both put our money together. We work on savings together. We work on our travel account together. Like, whatever it is that supports that couple, finding out in the beginning can make a world of difference in a marriage.
So there you have it. Premarital counseling is just as important as sitting down and talking with a financial professional, so that you are making sure that you are taking these two cultures and coming together to recreate and reform a new culture, especially when it comes to the vision of money and where you see yourself and where you desire to see yourself as a couple financially. So the next question I have, Paris, is for the person listening, they may wonder, okay, from where I am, what does financial protection look like? How do I get started with financial protection? Can you give some insight on the woman that's rebuilding after a setback, on financial protection and what that may look like for her?
So, Cheryl, I think regardless of whether it's the woman who is experiencing a setback or somebody who's just trying to, make sure that they have the right things in place, the foundation of protection is the same. And so we kind of correlate it to building a home, right? The most important part of your house is the foundation. And so there are certain things that I want to make sure that I create a barrier around my money and my lifestyle, so that if certain things occur, then I already know that I'm going to be good. And so whether I have these things built already or whether I'm trying to build them, they're going to change. The amount that I need is going to change. And so I want to talk, high level about what those key areas are that can help you build a really, really strong foundation. And they all fall under the protection arena. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that we are looking at our emergency fund. Whether you experienced a setback and you completely depleted your emergency fund, or you still have a little bit in there and we're trying to figure out what the new number is that I need to get to. A lot of that goes in alignment with an individual's budget. And so I want to help you identify how much money we're spending on a monthly basis. And then we can figure out, based off of your capacity within your budget, how much we need to start putting towards your emergency fund. And this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, but my emergency fund definitely needs to be separated from my bill paying account. And then, third, it needs to be identified between myself or myself and a partner what qualifies me to take out of this emergency fund. Because if I don't put parameters around myself, then it's easy to pull, right? I may want to get my nails done, or I may want to get my hair done. And so if I'm rebuilding, it's really, really important for me to identify what qualifies me to pull out of this, because if it doesn't meet the criteria, then it has to stay in there. And that way you can build your money faster. And so the art of putting boundaries up is going to be really, really critical to the woman who's trying to recover from a setback. The second area is going to be debt management. So if I have accrued some debt, whether it be from lawyer fees or whatever it is from my setback, or maybe I lost my job temporarily and I got to figure out how to pay back, like you said, pay back the people that I owe, because that's really important. One, it's a biblical requirement. And two, we feel good when we pay back what we owe. And so a lot of times there are so many ways to develop strategies to pay back that money without moving into debt consolidation. Like you said, maybe I can write a letter to the credit card company and say, hey, these are my circumstances. Can we push back the payment for 60 days? And that way I've secured my credit score. And then I've communicated with that company so they know that I'm actively working to develop a plan. And a lot of the weight, Cheryl, that a lot of people's experience is, I'm going through this and then I'm watching my credit score plummet, right? That, like, the amount of anxiety that produces, because it's not a I think this is going to happen. I'm actually watching this happen, so it turns into a fear. And coming up with a debt management plan can reduce that fear. It can reduce, any anxiety about the future, because we can identify when we're going to be debt free based off of our new normal. And so the next area is definitely going to be looking at our ability to protect the most important thing to us, and that's our ability to make income. What happens if I am sick or injured and I need to have income still come in so that I can pay my bills? When you're resetting yourself, this is the perfect time to look at those things. So, what do you have available at work? If your employer offers a long term disability policy, is that something I should or should not be participating in? And is it going to cover enough of my bills? And so I work with people on a constant basis to say, hey, this is what you expend out on a monthly basis. What do we need to come in to cover, should you go down to illness or injury? And then lastly, we definitely want to look at life insurance. So if you are recovering from a setback, and this is probably one of the emotional questions that I get often, um, for a woman that's divorced or for a woman that's single, and you have kids, what happens if something happens to me and I do not have the proper protections in place for whoever I designated to take care of my children? Have I even designated that person? And so there's so many things to think about with respect to a foundation, that if you're recovering from a setback, there's a lot already on your mind, right? And so the perfect thing is to almost marry yourself or get into the right relationship with a financial coach or a financial advisor so they can help you talk through these things. Even though the conversation may be really, really scary, I think that it provides way more value the earlier that it's done. And so I do have clients that are approaching the setback. And a lot of times it's something that we don't think about. It's like, oh, let me get through this first. But what if you partnered with somebody and say, hey, this is, what I'm potentially expecting. How do I prepare myself for what's coming? And we can figure that out and help you move forward.
That's so good. That's so good. Thank you so much for giving us more insight. And I think the importance of this is us not waiting or assuming we'll sit down with someone after we figure out how to get past the setback, because sometimes that can set us back 10 steps. But if we acknowledge that, okay, I'm experiencing a setback, let me be proactive in a sense by saying, hey, this is where I am. Can you partner with me and assist me with formulating a plan? As you said, establishing an end date of, I know that I'm in debt now. I know that this setback has me here now, but at least I can see the future, and then seeing that there's a recovery after this. I think that's like so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we wrap this conversation that's focused on all things rebuilding and all things strategy and all things financial wellness, for the woman that's listening to take and lay hold of this information and also apply it to their life, what I want you to know is there is light at the end of the tunnel, no matter where you are. So continue to seek counseling and seek therapy. That's one component, but also work on your physical health. That's the second component. And the third component that is often overlooked, but is also so critical, is make sure that you are also seeking professional help when it comes to your financial wellness journey. And then lastly, I just want you to know that there is always a comeback story following destructions and following a setback. You're also looking at a person who my family has officially nicknamed me the comeback kid. I do believe that there is nothing that I can't recover from and nothing that I can't come back from the darkness that I did experience in 2015 to me standing here today, sharing my story and also sharing fundamentals and practical steps to help the woman that was just like me, recovering from loss and recovering from setback, just to sit in front of you today to say there is hope. And I look forward to also naming you the comeback kid. Paris, do you have anything that you would like to leave us with?
Yes. Rebuilding isn't just about money. It's the beginning of your new beginning, and every small step you take today is just building the foundation for a stronger tomorrow. So whether you're starting over from a divorce, whether it's the loss of a job, the loss of a child, the loss of a relationship, or you're just experiencing a financial hardship, just know that you are capable. Not only are you capable, but you are resilient, and you will rise again, because the comeback story starts with you. So thank you for having me, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Paris, for joining us.